Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to dive into something that is absolutely profound, yet it's a chapter of life that goes almost entirely unspoken. We're talking about the emotional and physical shifts that happen between the ages of 65 and 75. So, go ahead and settle in. Take a deep breath. Whether you are knocking on the door of this decade, living it right now, or maybe supporting someone who is, nobody really prepares us for how strangely different life starts to feel during these years. We get all these warnings about our 401ks and our cholesterol levels, right? But the internal, everyday shifts? Crickets. Well, we're going to change that right now by looking at the real truth of this transition.
So let's tackle the big question head on. What actually changes? A lot of folks secretly worry that the second they cross into their late 60s, life is suddenly going to hit a brick wall and become impossible. But the reality? It's way more subtle than that. Life doesn't just become impossible, it simply becomes heavier. Ordinary things, running a quick errand, pulling yourself out of a low chair, even picking up the phone to call a buddy, things that literally never cost you a second thought, suddenly ask a little more of you. They demand a bit more energy, a little more patience, and frankly, some real courage. And if you don't realize this is a totally universal shift, you might start beating yourself up over it. But as we'll see, understanding this gentle heaviness is step one to mastering it. Section 1. The danger of sameness. What happens when the world shrinks? This right here is a sneaky, sneaky trop. You don't just wake up one Tuesday and decide to stop actively living. Actually, it's more like you just start leaning into what feels comfortable, familiar, and perfectly safe. You go to the exact same diner, you slide into the same booth, zero stress, right? But there is a massive hidden cost to this. Your world shrinks without your permission. When nothing surprises your mind anymore, it stops being curious. It literally stops recording memories. Your days just start to blur together into this endless, repeating, photocopied life.
Listen to this, because it's an absolute game changer. The aging brain doesn't need excitement nearly as much as it needs interruption. Think about how freeing that is. You don't have to go jump out of an airplane at 73 to keep your edge. You literally just need to do one unfamiliar thing a week. Walk down a completely different street, pick up a book by an author you've never heard of, sit on a different bench at the park. These tiny, simple interruptions force your brain to wake up and say, hey, pay attention. And that is exactly how you keep your mind truly alive.
Section 2. The shrinking perimeter. Navigating isolation and connection.
We see this so often, especially with strong, hardworking guys who spent their whole lives holding down a busy perimeter full of colleagues and clients. Suddenly, that social calendar starts to quietly fade. It happens in slow motion. You stop calling folks because you're a bit tired, then you politely decline a couple of invites, and before you know it, the phone is barely ringing. And we really have to draw a hard line here between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is beautiful. Sitting by the window with your morning coffee, that's rich, peaceful, and it feeds your spirit. But loneliness, man, loneliness is entirely different. It feels empty and heavy, like the walls are slowly creeping in on you. The brutal truth is, your internal drive to reach out usually disappears a long time before your friends actually do. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway is this. You cannot just sit in your recliner waiting for the motivation to socialize to magically hit you like a lightning bolt. Motivation is a completely fickle friend in our later years. Action comes first. Feeling follows. You have to literally lace up your shoes and get out the door before the desire even arrives. Go seek out tiny, repeated human connections. The cashier who always recognizes you, the neighbor waving from their driveway. These small touch points are essential armor against isolation. You absolutely don't need a massive social circle, but you've got to keep that regular human contact alive. Section 3. The physical reality. The daily battle between hesitation and pride. Aging physically rarely hits you all at once. It's more like a slow rolling fog. You start noticing this tiny, newly calculated pause before you climb a stepladder you've used 1,000 times, or before you hoist yourself out of a deep couch. And this points to the real danger. Many times the body doesn't stop first. The willingness stops first. It starts small. You avoid one awkward movement, then another. You stop reaching for the high shelves. And slowly, stealthily, your body learns to live a much smaller life. You have to keep telling your nervous system that you are still in the game. Consistency is way more important than intensity here.
This brings us to a really fierce battle for folks in this generation, especially for the men out there who have always prided themselves on being the unwavering providers and protectors. Asking for help? I mean, think of Walter. Walter was a proud, retired electrician, tough as nails. He absolutely refused to let anyone mow his lawn, wouldn't touch a cane, wouldn't ask anyone for a lift. His favorite phrase was, "I'm fine." Well, he was fine until one bad fall put him in the hospital, and he lost almost all his independence in a matter of months. Walter just waited too long. We have got to flip the script on this. Asking for help is not a surrender of your dignity. It is a brilliant strategy to protect it.
So, what does smart aging actually look like in practice? It's about being strategic. Preserve your energy for the stuff that truly brings you joy. Accept a little bit of support early on, way before some crisis forces your hand. And honestly, this might be the most important part. Allow your loved ones the privilege of caring for you. When you stubbornly refuse every single offer of help because of pride, you probably think you're protecting your family from being burdened. But the truth? You're actually just shutting them out of loving you.
Section 4. The internal landscape. Navigating grief and finding a brand new purpose. Look, by the time you're navigating your 70s, you are invariably carrying around some invisible absences. A spouse, a sibling, old buddies, maybe even the old neighborhood. Sometimes, a certain song plays at the hardware store and your chest just tightens up. Younger folks tend to think grief is just a task you eventually check off a list, but we learn that it just changes shape. So instead of constantly fighting that feeling, try this incredible reframe. What if remembering is part of loving? Missing people simply means they mattered to you. Carry those memories with immense tenderness, say their names out loud, but make sure you keep laughing and living too.
As those old chapters inevitably close, you get hit with a pretty heavy, sometimes frightening question: who am I now? For 50 years, your identity was rock solid because somebody needed you. You were the boss, the worker, the guy who fixed things, the ultimate problem solver. Your alarm clock went off and the day came with clear instructions. Then, boom, retirement hits. The schedules vanish, the phone stops ringing, and this vast emptiness sets in. The loss of that daily role, that is the real wound hiding underneath the whole aging process.
This requires us to build a completely new framework for self-worth. When we're young, the world basically demands we build our identity on hustle, speed, and endless productivity. We measure our value by how much stuff we get done. But aging teaches us something profoundly wiser. Identity can be built simply through presence, through deep intentional attention, through appreciating what remains instead of only mourning what's gone. You are no longer defined by how useful you are to the economy. You're defined by your capacity to just sit there, breathe, and be fully alive and present. Section 5. The resolution. Finding grace and intention for the road ahead. At the end of the day, aging with peace is fundamentally about adaptation. It's about dropping the rope, stopping the fight against reality, and finding massive joy in the quieter things. A really good warm cup of coffee, hearing your grandchild's voice on the phone, the way the sunlight hits the kitchen table in the late afternoon, a quiet walk right at dusk. When you're 30 and chasing the world, these things sound totally insignificant, but later in life, they become absolutely enormous. If your brain and body require a little more intention than they used to, that's not a failure. That's just being human. It gives you the space to finally receive joy in its truest, smallest forms. I want to wrap up this explainer with one incredibly powerful thought for you to carry forward. Softness without surrender. You can completely adapt, you can accept a helping hand, and you can slow down, all without giving up on your life. Be a little kinder to yourself than you were yesterday, man. You've come a long, long way to get here. But before we go, I want to leave you with this to chew on. Now that you know the absolute danger of a shrinking world, what is the one unfamiliar thing you are going to choose to do tomorrow to wake your spirit back up?